Mark 5, 1 through 20. And then I think the next one is Luke. She's got, and I hope it's right. I haven't looked up the Luke one, but it's Luke 8, 26 through 39. And we'll read these different versions and then discuss them here. One of the things we're going to notice right away is that some of the different stories are going to change from one person that is, or one man that is demon possessed. All of them live in the tombs. Another one, Matthew's version, is starting off with two men. Either the case, Jesus performs miracles for these guys and changes their lives. So Matthew 8, 28 is where it starts here. And when he came to the other side, to the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men coming out of the tombs, exceedingly furious, so that no one could pass that way, and suddenly cried out, saying, "What have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before the time?" Now a good ways off from them there was a herd of many swine feeding. Now, as we look at this, especially in 31, so the demons, so we understand who's talking here. It's not the men at all. The men have come to Jesus and they're trying to express their feelings, but the demons are speaking through them, and that's what we see recorded here, is the demons are actually speaking to Jesus here. So the demons begged him, speaking of Jesus, saying, "If you cast us out, permit us to go away into the herd of swine." And then he said to them, "Go." So one little word, go. So when they had come out, they went into the herd of swine, and suddenly the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place and into the sea and perished in the water. Then those who kept them fled, and they went away into the city and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to depart their region. So that's one variation, but there's more to the story as we read in through Mark. Mark, we just went through this in our Bible study, so Mark 5 is where we'll pick this up again. And this one's going to end up with one person, is how that Mark picks it up, but it doesn't really matter. We still see the same kind of conversation, but we see a little bit more with the men and Jesus. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to a country called Galgarnus. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles had been broken in pieces, so neither could anyone tame him. And also night and day he was in the mountains and the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. Now we see things a little different in this one. I like this scenario where the man's coming to worship Jesus. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of God, the Most High? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. And he said to him, and we'll see right away, this is not the gentleman speaking at all. This is the demons again, just like we saw in the last part of it. And he said to him, come out of him, come out of the man, unclean spirit. Then he asked him, what is your name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legions, for we are many. Also he begged him earnestly that he should be send him out of the, would not send him out of the country. Now there was a large herd of swine, was feeding on the near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, send us to the swine, that we may enter them. And at once Jesus gave them permission. And the unclean spirits went out of and entered the swine. And there was about 2,000 of them. The herd ran violently down the steep place and into the sea and drowned in the sea. So those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion, sitting, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who saw them, and how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed and about the swine. Then they began to plead with him to depart from their region. When they got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had compassion on you. And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis and all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. It's interesting on this story, especially the story that Mark gives us. It's one last man. The story, for the most part, you can see the same familiar things with the one in Matthew. But we see that Jesus sends this guy who's just been demon-possessed for quite some time. He really wants to hang out with Jesus. I mean, he's just been freed from demon possession. He's been freed from not being in his right mind. He's been freed from have to hanging out with the tombs and be a crazy man. He's been freed from all that. Now he has got peace. He's got understanding. He can talk. He can communicate with people. He can be a regular person. And he really desperately wants to hang around with Jesus. Jesus just freed him. I mean, wouldn't you? So many of us have been freed from sin, and all it does is draw us closer to Jesus. When we are freed from the things that trouble us and cause us the most pain, don't you want to hang out even more with Jesus? I mean, every time we are freed from things that are really troubling us, because we've been relieved by it by Jesus through prayer or otherwise, it just makes us want to hang out more. But Jesus says to him, no, go back and tell your friends what God has done for you. And in a lot of cases, he's saying the same thing for us. Tell others what Jesus has done for you, what he's doing in your life, how he's blessing you, and how he is bringing you freedom and forgiveness, and also freeing us from the devil and his temptations and things that it does. All right, our next miracle is found in Matthew 9, 20 through 22. It's not a really big one. we'll read more about it, and it looks like we might even, I'll tell you what, let's join me in Luke 8. Hopefully Luke 8 is it. I see that written on my notes here. Luke 8, 42 to 48. Luke 8. Matthew, Mark, Luke. Luke 8, Luke 8, 42 through 48. Okay, yes, all right. And behold, there came a man named Jairus. He was a ruler of the synagogue, and he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. But as he went, the multitude thronged him. Now a woman, having a flow of blood for 12 years, so basically for the same length of time this little girl of Jairus has been alive, this lady has had a flow of blood. Get back where I was at. Yeah, thank you, in 43. Now the woman having the flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all of her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow stopped. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" You're in the middle of the crowd. You're getting bumped around. People are bumping off of you. You're trying to make footsteps straight ahead, but everybody wants to touch you. Everybody wants to be close to you. And you're in a crowd. You're in close to the city walls or whatever else. And so people are in a big old throng. And yeah, you can't hardly swing your arms as you're walking. You're bumping into somebody. Jesus asked this question, "Who touched me?" Now the reason how come Jesus asked this is because he felt the power go out of him. Because by faith, this lady was able to be healed. And she knew it right away, and so did Jesus. So, he says there in 45, Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Then all denied it. And Peter and those with him said, "Master, the multitude throng and presses you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceived power going out from me." Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and fell down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all the people, and the reason she had touched him, and how she had been healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Now, isn't that interesting? I mean, this lady's trembling because she knows she's been healed. And for Jesus to stop the crowd and say, "Who touched me?" and say, "Hey, I just felt some power go out of me." How and why? He didn't ask the how. He just asked, "Who?" And she comes trembling before him. You can imagine being that lady. And it's like, really? In the middle of all this crowd? Yeah, it was me. And she's scared. What's Jesus going to do? She don't have knowledge of who he is as a person or anything else much, but she has the faith that he's the Son of God and that she can be healed. And she was healed because of it. And Jesus gives her such a blessing. I mean, you don't see him angry or anything else. He asked the question, of course, who touched me? But he says, daughter, be of good cheer. So he's already trying to disband all of her fears and all of her being scared and all of her worried. And it's like, daughter, be of good cheer. You almost, the things we don't see in black and white that we might have saw in person was him reaching down and pulling her up and saying, daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. I'm telling you what, if she had been fighting this for that many years and having such a terrible time, she was hopping and skipping and jumping on the way home. She was feeling good about life again because she had been healed and had spent a lot of money on the medical services. Are you ready?
This really is the case of two daughters in this story, because the next miracle we're going to look at was started before he heals the woman that Marlon just talked about. And this is going to be in Matthew 9, start at 18. And you may have just seen this. So it says, while he was saying this, a ruler came and knelt before him and said, my daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her and she will live. So that story gets completely interrupted by what we just heard. And we pick it up again at verse 23. When Jesus entered the ruler's house and saw the flute players and a noisy crowd, he said, go away, the girl is not dead but asleep. But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by hand, and she got up. News of this spread through all the region. And of course, in other Gospels, we get the name of this leader as Jairus. It's his daughter. So you can imagine, Tale of Two Daughters here is that Jesus is concerned about all people, but here he stops to heal the woman that Marlon just read in, and then he's going to go see this other little girl who is this man's daughter as well. And I just think of the father heart here, right, who understands the same heart that comes to him and says, hey, my daughter's just died, I need your help. It's the same father's heart who allows himself to be interrupted by this other daughter that is in distress. So I'm wondering what you guys see in the story. What do you get from this that tells us about God and who he is? So when you say it, I'm just going to repeat it back so they can hear it on the recording. So what do you guys see or learn about Jesus in this story? He loves.
Both of these ladies equally. He tells the one lady, be of good cheer. Next one, he's trying to comfort the man before he ever even gets to the daughter and say, listen, just have faith.
Yeah. So he loves them equally. And I love what you just pointed out there. It's almost like from a father to a father, like the earlier when we were talking in Sabbath school, that arm around the shoulder moment practically, right? Like, yeah, just have faith. It's okay. We're gonna go through this together. That's great. Thank you, Marlon. Anybody else? Caring, compassionate. Yes. If anybody was ever in doubt, because I know sometimes people look at the Bible and go, well, God is so hard on women, and he doesn't care about them. They don't get their names in different things, and da-da-da-da. If you ever were in doubt, number one, that is not God's heart. And number two, these stories alone should convince you that God absolutely has a special place in his heart for women. He created men and women, so he cares about both. And I love what Marlon said a moment ago, too, about comforting the father, too. Because when he walks into this house, because the girl has already died, the way it says it here, right? And I think in other versions it says, come because my daughter's dying, and he is told, right? Oh, she's died, never mind. But in this one, it just takes us straight to the house, and they have all this noise, and they're already in the process of the whole rituals and things that they would do when somebody has died. And Jesus tells them, and this is a moment of truth here, he goes, hey, this girl isn't dead, but she's asleep. And so I think this speaks really clearly to the understanding, the biblical understanding of what death is. And I'm going to throw this in for a second, because I think it's important that there's death as we think of it, just, one day we will all, unless Jesus comes, right? Until Jesus comes, we'll die. But there's death in the sense of like the second death. And when he's talking here, right, what is he actually talking about? The girl has actually died, but she's not, if you will, irretrievable, right? He has power over life. So he's saying like, well, yeah, she's dead. She's the first death. Yeah. Of course, the people at that point just mock him, scoff him for that. They're just like, we know what dead looks like, Jesus. So they have to be put outside. And when I look at that example too. Sometimes we need to get the people who are around us that are distracting us, maybe mocking us, but maybe just kind of tell us, oh, that's impossible, that's not going to happen. Sometimes you just need to put them outside the door. You need to make them go out. And Jesus says, get out. Get them all out of here. And when he goes in to her, yes, he so lovingly takes her by the hand and says to her, get up. Now, it doesn't say that in this one. That's in one of the other Gospels. But he does tell her to get up and wake up, and restores her to her parents. Restores her right back to mom and dad. Give her something to eat. Here she is. Now, ultimately, with stories like this, what do we learn? Because is that little girl still among us today? She was raised back to life, but she's not here now. She's not still living. So what's the point in this? There's a point. Like, what's the point here? Why is Jesus, like, she's going to die eventually. Why bring her back then? Send her through life, and what do we take away from that? She was young. Mm-hmm. There was faith that he could bring her back to life. And in that particular case, right, he knew this was going to be to his glory. Mm. And it showed the parents' faith in them. Mm. Sure. Could have been following him. Yes, that's a really good point. It doesn't say much. It does tell us that he has an official capacity. He's a ruler in the synagogue, which lets us know that, sometimes we, particularly the Pharisees and Sadducees, get a bum rap, and the leaders do, but that what we are recognizing, if you look between the lines, and here's one, that there are people who were in leading positions that were like, there's something about this Jesus. And this is a good example of that. And when his daughter's in dire need, yeah, who knows? He's obviously heard about him, and he calls for help.
If Jesus knows this gentleman, when he comes to town, he's going to stop at the synagogue and preach.
Yes, that's a good point, right? If Jesus knows this man, or he's coming through, yeah, this may be the synagogue he's coming through. Thank you, Marlon. That's a great observation, right? He's maybe already heard him speak, because that would have been his custom to go into the sanctuary on a Sabbath or synagogue on a Sabbath and share. So yeah, maybe he's already heard him here. But I love that we pointed out too the faith of the parents. Sometimes God is using these really bad circumstances to reach the other people around us too. And yeah, there was a lot of faith on those parents to step out and ask for this. For their little daughter, but how much God must have been pleased to not only take a moment to stop and heal that adult woman there, but to stop and heal this child and restore her to her parents. I mean, isn't that his whole plan, right? Restoration. Now we're going to move on to our next miracle, and it's right next to this. So we're going to stay in Matthew, and this starts in 27. As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him out, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him and asked them, he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, it will be done." And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." But they went out and spread the news about him all over the region. Now, I'm going to skip to the end for a second because we saw this early on in Jesus' ministry, that he was telling people, don't tell other folks, right? Because as soon as word got out, what was the problem? Crowds would come, and while Jesus wants to be available in healing, crowds are coming for the physical healing and actually hampering him in some ways of what he's trying to do. So he's, again, trying to be like, I've got a purpose here, I've got things I want to do. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want to heal, but his purpose was more than just physical healing. But it's funny that once again, they can't. They can't contain themselves, which should tell us something right off the bat. When Jesus has interacted in your life and touched your life, you can't contain it. Even if you are containing it, it's probably just coming out of you and just the way that you look, that you have been with Jesus. But before that, there's obviously more to this story. So what do you see about God here in this miracle story today? These 2 blind men following Jesus. What do we learn about God? Asked them if they believed.
So possibly they were following him to heal, but
They were.
okay, are you just following him because you hear what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you following because you have faith that I can heal?
I love that point, right? Are they just following him because that's what people are doing and they hear that this stuff can happen, or did they actually believe that, right? Right there in the question. And this is the fun part about going through these miracles together. Jesus healed blind men elsewhere, and yet each one has a different interaction, right? And in this particular case, he says, well, do you believe that I'm able to do this? Some of the other ones, he doesn't ask that type of question. He does something else, and we'll see some of those coming up. But these guys, he does. And I like how Missy just said that, like, trying to get at their motive. Are you just here because the crowd is here and they all want to be healed, or do you really believe in what I'm doing? And they both reply, "Yes, Lord." Like, they're pretty quick on that. And I love Jesus' response. According to what? Your faith. Will it be done to you? Those should be familiar words to us about faith.
You want to have all the faith that you can have to have that 2020 sight, too.
All the faith you can have to have 2020. Good point. How much faith do you have? I only got a little bit back.
Yeah, I'm just a little
Yeah.
blur.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, because in one of the other miracles he does, spoiler alert, that'll be coming up, right? The man's eyesight's not fully restored the first time. It has to go second time. But that's not what it says here, but that is kind of a funny way to think of that, right? And it says there, and their sight was restored, right? It was once he was able to, and did he already know what their faith was? Right. Why is he asking that question? It's not because he's like, I need to know. Like, he already knows. The question is being asked for them and an example to the people that are around them. And so I love that because it's a reminder to ourselves, too, when we're asking, according to our faith. And where at other points does Jesus talk about? Every single one of these miracles have a faith element in them, right? And at various points, he will say, especially to the disciples, that's the most classic one, you have little faith, right? When he calms the storm, he's telling them, boy, you just got a little bit of faith. I just did this gigantic thing. You guys had little faith in me. But these men had apparently 2020 faith. That should be a sermon title right there. 2020 faith that, for vision, of course, that they were going to be restored, and they were. right? It doesn't tell us what their story was. It doesn't tell us how they ended up blind. They born that way. We don't know. But what we do know is that by the time they are here in this story, they have faith enough to believe that Jesus can do this. And Jesus does it. And they cannot contain themselves. They're so excited that they go out. And what's it say? They went out and spread the news about him all over the region. Not even just like a little bit. Went all over the region. And you have to think, did Jesus know that when he said that he would get what we call a paradoxical reaction, that he'd be, y'all know this, with a secret, please don't tell, As soon as you tell a secret, I mean, some of you are really good at secrets, but a lot of us are not good at that. Just try, well, maybe you shouldn't. I was going to say, just try sometimes, something you don't care about, put that out there and see if you don't hear it out elsewhere and say, this is top secret. See how well we contain that. Don't do that with anything sensitive. But you have to wonder if Jesus knew by telling them, don't do this, that they were going to share. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, how could you not notice, especially in that case where you're like, you can see me now, like something's different. Your eyes look different. Like there's no way, especially them walking around, that you could not see that something was different because they could literally see. That's a good point.
Could you see their face is hurting from the smile on their face because they can see things that they have not ever seen.
Yeah, the miracle of sight, yeah.
And dancing around saying, oh, look at that beautiful color, or what. People are looking at it like, what's wrong with you? And, I mean, the first thing you're going to want to say
Yeah,
is,
they see so many different things.
I just received my sight from Jesus.
Yeah.
We heard about this guy.
Yeah, there was no containing that. You have to think that Jesus knew that, and they were just going to share. And shouldn't that be, as a wrapping up, shouldn't that be our experience, right? When Jesus touches our life, that we are just brimming full of wanting to share. Guess what Jesus has done in my life? He's restored, hopefully in our case, spiritual sight. He has restored me. Maybe it's physically, just like what we saw with the woman earlier. And he's willing and able to do all of that. And of course, we want to shout and sing for joy in moments like that. Let's go ahead and do our closing song, which is Refiner's Fire, and it is in that same Wrangell Vespers book.